this video, I'll share my first impressions on the Sony ZV-E10 camera. This is the latest Sony APS-C camera. This camera is marketed heavily for vloggers and similar video content creators, but of course you can use this also for photography. Let's start with the ergonomics. This is a fairly small camera with not too many physical controls. There's only one proper command dial which you can operate with your thumb, and then there is another dial at the back of the camera, and there is no mode dial, which can be a little bit confusing. At least it was for me when I first started using this camera. It took me a while to figure out how to quickly change the mode from P to M or S or A and so forth. This is a really small camera. The camera body weighs in only about 342 grams, which is not much. But this is still pretty comfortable to hold, and the grip is big enough so that it doesn't feel like the camera is going to fall off your hand. But I suppose if you have big hands, you are probably going to feel that the grip is not big enough. This camera uses the smaller Sony FW50 battery, but still the battery life feels pretty good. I didn't actually measure the battery life, but when I was using the camera, it felt that the battery is going to easily last one full day in my use. And of course there is no battery charger with the camera. You charge the battery with the USB-C. So if you plan to buy more than one battery, you better also buy a dedicated separate battery charger, because charging more than one battery, this camera is marketed heavily for vloggers. But other than that, I think this is a really neat and handy accessory, this microphone. The active mode instead works pretty well. It stabilizes the camera or the picture pretty well even if you walk, but the massive crop is a major downside in my opinion. It equals roughly to turning the zoom from 10 to 14 millimeters, which is a lot of crop. But not all vlogging is walking around, and if you use a tripod or this pretty good accessory grip and put the camera on some solid surface like a table, bench or whatever, then of course you don't need a stabilizer at all. These limited controls may look like a major downside, but once you get used to the camera, it's not that bad actually. Only the fully manual mode is a little bit awkward because you only have two dials. But of course this camera is not designed to be used in any kind of professional or semi-professional use. This is more suitable for casual shooting and to be used with fully automatic mode, so that you don't have to use the controls so much. One of the nice things with this camera is that you can program the buttons differently for photo and video. And also some of the most important settings are separate for photo and video, and that makes it pretty fluent to go from video to photo and then back to video and then back to photo and so on. One of the worst downsides with this camera is the image stabilizer, because this camera does not have any kind of in-body stabilizer. And for video it's kind of okay, not great, but it's okay, because for video you can turn on the active mode, which essentially is electronic stabilizer, and if your lens happens to have optical stabilizer, those two work together quite well, but you'll get that massive crop, which is not that great. But if you are a photographer and you happen to have a lens without any kind of optical stabilizer, like for example this excellent Sony 50mm f2.5G and most other prime lenses, then you have no stabilizer at all. And I think that's a serious downside especially today when you think that in-body stabilizer is becoming almost like a standard on almost every camera. So I think this can be a pretty good beginner's first system camera, because this is relatively easy to use and easy to get started with your system camera photography. And I also think this can work pretty well for vlogging. This has many good features for vlogging, and I definitely recommend this Sony 10 to 18mm f4 stabilized lens if you are going to vlog with this camera. But if you are more experienced photographer, you might feel a bit frustrated with this camera because of the limited controls and also the lack of viewfinder. However, this is a really small, lightweight camera, and if you mount a compact lens on this camera, this could also be your to-go camera, or the camera that you take with you anywhere you